Good morning, Olive, Arlo, and Frank. Hopefully, my voice will make it through this. Sitting here in the living room waiting for the sun to come up, and I have a cup of tea here. Try to get this voice. Try to get this voice back. Anyway, we're going to do something a little different today. We're going to be in Matthew chapter 14. And I'm going to show you on the Net Bible how to get there. So if you go to bible.org and bring up the website, it looks like this. And there's all kinds of resources here. There's a podcast. There's something called the Study Suite. There's a way to purchase the Net Bible, and that looks like the one that I have right here. Although I've owned this one in the past, and I love this one because it has all the notes in it. When I read the Bible personally, I don't normally read it online. I normally read the physical Bible, but that's just me. So there's a blog, and there's a way to engage, there's a way to impact probably the world, there's sharing it on social media, which I haven't done. But anyway, let's get to the Bible itself. Now, let's see what the menu is. That's about the people. There's their copyright and how to donate to them. The report is probably their financial report. Here's the doctrine, and it tells what they believe in. That's very important when you're deciding on a Bible to read. Reading through the Bible, unless you're like a madman, is a long process. And you want it to be a long process. You want it to actually be a lifelong process. I've probably read the entire Bible 5 times. Now, I got saved in 1996, and it's 2023. So we're talking about 27 years ago. And so maybe 5 times, but maybe only 4 times. But there were times when I read, if you read 3 chapters a day, give or take, it takes you a year to get through. So if you would just read 1 chapter a day, which isn't a bad thing to do, you're going to get through it in 3 years. So I've done the 3 chapters a day, and I've done that probably 2 times. I know that I've read the Net Bible all the way through. I had a Bible called the Archaeology Bible. I didn't get all the way through that. It was fascinating because it told about the archaeological discoveries that they made. And a lot of times that's like the veracity, the truth of the Bible is based on facts. Most people don't know those facts. So whether you believe in all this stuff about, well, Jesus walked on water and he rose people from the dead and God created the world in 6 days, there's certain things that don't have to be just believed. They can be studied. And one thing is through the text. I mean, there are more biblical texts available than any other ancient work, like far more. I read a study one time, and they did all the classicals, the um, classical stories, the Aeneid, the Iliad, the Odyssey, and there's really not a lot of, I think it's called extant versions of any of them. Beowulf. As you get further towards us in history, there's more, but the Bible just has a ton of things. And so this Bible talks about that. It talks about um, the the original Greek in the New Testament, or the original Hebrew, what the words mean in the original Hebrew, and why they translated them the way they did into English. And this is all really good stuff because it helps you understand what you're reading. You still need faith to believe that Jesus walked on water. Nobody has ever proved that, like, well, this is how somebody can walk on water. But he didn't walk on water because human beings could do it. They just didn't know how. He walked on water because he's God. So now there's a bookstore here, and I don't know what the labs are. I'm not going to go into all this stuff. And here's another way to get to the blogs that they have. But what we want to get into is the Bible itself. And here it is. It defaults to Matthew. But if you go up here, you can change which Bible you're reading. And we're going to stay with the Net Bible too, because it's the most recent one. You can change the size of the print, make it a little bit bigger, and that's not a bad thing, especially because you may be reading this on your phone. And if I was reading it on my phone, I definitely wouldn't be able to see it. I think this is a way to send it someplace. You can bookmark. And I guess that's a daily reading plan right there. But before we get into this over here, let's look at this. Oh no, you know what? Let's get to where we want to get to. So here's starting with Genesis. And so down here you have Matthew, Mark, Luke, John. And we want chapter 14. The death of John the Baptist. Now, we'll get back to notes in a second. So you have a search thing, and you can search the Bible. You can search Bible.org, which is this website. You can search the notes and journals. There's filters down here, the specific book, New Testament, Old Testament, all by relevance, by verse order. So it would, by relevance means that they would give it to you based on what is the closest thing to what it thinks you're searching for. And by verse order, it would give you all of the things it thinks you're searching for. And it's always going to give you all of them, but not listed in the order of how close it is, but just in the order of the verses. So it would start Matthew 1:1, and it would go down from there, Matthew 14:1, blah, 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 on and on. So there's notes that you can put in here. Oh no, I'm sorry, I'm at the wrong part here. So here's a bunch of references. When we start to read this, where there's a guy named Bob Utley. I wonder if he's related to Chase Utley, the baseball player, former baseball player, who wrote a book on on Matthew 14. Here's one when we get to footnote 8 down here. Jesus walks on water by Bob Hooper. Here's the textual problem of this, which is Greek. And it's funny because there's an expression, it's all Greek to me. And that means I don't understand it because I don't read Greek. Well, I actually don't understand this because these are different letters than we use. Here's the feeding of the 5,000 by Alan Ross. So you can click on these and it'll bring up an expository discussion of what this means and um, how to use it in your life, those kind of things. Speaking of Greek, here is the actual text that this was taken from. And you go, okay, well, this is all Greek to me, but if you look, let's move this up a little bit. I didn't bring the screen down far enough, but if you just highlight a word over here, it'll highlight the word over here. And at the very bottom, it tells you what that word means. Some of it is Greek, is still Greek stuff. This is for people who are real scholars. But it's awesome that you can do that. So here we can put a different Bible over here. So let's just put, we did the King James Bible the other day. So here it's the King James Version. And over here it's the Net Bible still. So that's called a parallel Bible, where you can read it in one version and then to the right of that read it in the other version. That's parallel Bible. But we're going to put it back there. So that's exactly the same. But I don't usually leave that over there. I leave this over there, the notes. And we're not going to read all these notes right now. I just need you to know that they're there. So we're going to first look at the death of John the Baptist. And it says, at that time, Herod the Tetrarch. And you say, okay, well, what is a tetrarch? Well, if these aren't lined up, because they don't move up as you move this up. And so let's just take 6 down here. Although Herod 6, see, it'll bring up 6. The Greek he has been specified in the translation for clarity. So right there they're saying that in the Greek it just says he, whatever the word for he is. But they put Herod in there so that you would understand that that's who they were talking about. And then Herod the Tetrarch, and it says a tetrarch is a ruler with rank and authority lower than a king, ruled only with the approval of the Roman authorities. And Rome was, they owned the Judea at the time where this all happened, and Samaria. This was roughly equivalent to being governor of a region, which is It's very similar to the governors that we have. I live in Florida, and we have a governor. There's a governor where you live. I live in Louisiana. There's a governor in Tennessee. So we have different governors. They're not, they're way less powerful than the president. They can't go to war against people. That they have to, they, they're held responsible to their state legislatures, and the military that they have under them can only be called up by the national government. And it says here sometimes they call this guy a king, but that's just reflecting popular usage rather than an official title. And they give you examples of that, and when you hover over it, it shows you in that Bible what this was. Matthew 4:9 or 14:9, and then Mark 8:14-29. Now King Herod heard this, for Jesus' name had become known. So they called him, Mark called him a king there, but it's telling you he's not really a king. So those things are over there. And today you'll be seeing them. I mean, you're not going to see them unless I click on other ones. So let's take it all the way down. Matthew chapter 14, verse 1 says, at that time Herod the Tetrarch heard reports about Jesus, and he said to his servants, this is John the Baptist. He has been raised from the dead, and we saw recently that he had John the Baptist put to death. And because of this, miraculous powers are at work in him. For Herod had arrested John, bound him, put him in prison on account of Herodias, his brother Philip's wife. I think he winds up marrying her. Oh, he had married her. Duh. Because John had repeatedly told him it is not lawful for you to have her. So his brother, I think his brother was still alive. Although Herod wanted to kill John, he feared the crowd because they accepted him as a prophet. But on Herod's birthday, the daughter of Herodias danced before them and pleased Herod. Pleased Herod so much that he promised with an oath to give her whatever she asked. Instructed by her mother, she said, give me the head of John the Baptist here on a platter. And in the King James Version, it's called a Charger, like a Dodge Charger. And there's an expression that you give somebody's head on a silver platter. I want his head on a silver platter. That means I want you to kill this person for me. Not in the corporate world, it doesn't mean literally, but it's saying, like, you're a dead man. I'm more powerful than you are. I want this guy's head on he's saying this to, I want your head. Say, I want your head on a silver platter. It means you're dead to me. I'm more powerful than you, and you're not going to survive what's coming up. So you might as well leave the organization. Give me the head of John the Baptist here on a platter. Although it grieved the king because of his oath, and there it says king, and king commanded. Herod was technically not a king, but this reflects popular usage, and that's what we saw before, popular usage. Because of his oath and the dinner guests, he commanded it to be given. So this is peer pressure, but he didn't need to fold under peer pressure. So it's like reputation. Normally it would be peer pressure, like, oh, he did this because all his friends were there having dinner with him. But it's not that, it's reputation. These people are not as powerful as him. He can do whatever he wants. But his wife told his daughter, I want this man killed. I want him killed by cutting his head off with a sword. And that wasn't the way that they executed prisoners in Rome. They crucified them. They didn't chop anybody's head off with a sword, but he said, I want somebody to go down into the dungeon where they have this guy, cut his head off, and then bring his head to this party and show his head off in front of everybody. That's like pure evil. Herodias and the daughter, well, more Herodias than the daughter, and I guess the daughter couldn't say no. But that's just pure evil. So he sent and had John beheaded in the prison. His head was brought on a platter and given to the girl, and she brought it to her mother. Then John's disciples came and took the body and buried it, and went and told Jesus. They didn't tell Jesus because he needed to know. He knew. They told Jesus because it's like, ooh. This was our guy. So you think Jesus is going to storm into this place and put his head back on. But it's not time for that. John's not the person that's supposed to happen to. I mean, he never put somebody's head back on. An ear, he puts a guy's ear back on, but not a head. Peter lops off, and that might be in this version of the story. Lops off a soldier's ear with his sword. Jesus just sticks it back on. And when Jesus heard this, he went away from there privately in a boat to an isolated place. So he didn't run to the problem. He didn't flee. It doesn't say he fled because he was afraid. He just went to an isolated place. But when the crowd heard about it, they followed him on foot from the town. So this lake is round. It's in the middle of the country. And it's not that wide. I think it might be 7 miles at the most distant point across it. So you can sail from point to point, but people can eventually find you on foot. As he got out, he saw the large crowd, and he had compassion on them and healed their sick. and these people were freaked out too, because a lot of them were into John the Baptist. They believed he was a prophet. And a lot of prophets were killed in the Old Testament. And now it's one happening. Like, these people didn't know, well, this is the New Testament. They were just living their life. people don't know about stuff like, when the Civil War broke out in the United States, nobody knew who was going to win. And for a brief time, it looked like the South may win. Now, if the South won, they weren't going to impose themselves on the North, but we would have a completely different country right now. I would have been born in a different country. Pennsylvania was in the North than I live in now, Florida, which what wasn't in the South then, I don't think. I don't even think it was a territory. Well, it might have been a territory, but it wasn't a state when the Civil War was fought. But nobody knew who was going to win. These people are freaked. What's Jesus do? He does what he's been doing throughout this part of the Bible. Oh, don't worry about that. I'm here. Want me to show you that I can still do what I've been doing? Bring me some sick folks. And then he heals them. When evening arrived, his disciples came to him saying, "This is an isolated place, and the hour is already late. Send the crowds away so that they can go into the village and buy food for themselves." What's the problem here? They're not going, "Hey, Jesus, these people are hungry. What should we do?" They're coming to him with the solution. Now, in the modern world, that's a good thing. When you come to your boss, don't just go, "Oh, we have a problem." Say, "Hey, boss, we have a problem. Here's what the problem is, and this might be a solution. What do you think?" But this is Jesus, and they're going like, well, "This is what you need to do, Jesus, because we know a lot of stuff about feeding people." Well, apparently Jesus knew a lot more about feeding people than they did. But he replied, "They don't need to go. You give them something to eat." so, and if you come to your boss and say there's a problem, he's probably going to go solve it. So now they're confronted with, well, what can we do? We can't run to the town. Well, let's see if anybody brought any food. And these are all good questions to ask, avenues to explore. And they said to him, "We have here only 5 loaves and 2 fish." And these were small loaves. I don't know if they were unleavened bread or not, but they're not big loaves. And this is 5,000. I think it's 5,000 in total. Oh, I haven't even. Only 5 loaves and 2 fish. And I don't think these are enormous, like 5,000 people, and I think it's 5,000 men. So the women and children would make it more than that. "Bring them here to me," he replied. Then he instructed the crowds to sit down on the grass. He took the 5 loaves and 2 fish, and looking up to heaven, he gave thanks and broke the loaves. He gave them to his disciples, who in turn gave them to the crowds. They all ate and were satisfied, and they picked up the broken pieces left over. 12 baskets full. Not counting women and children, there were about 5,000 men who ate. So it actually spells it out in this version of the Bible. So maybe there were 10,000 or, whatever. Because a lot of the women and children, if you have babies and stuff, maybe you're not out there. So some of the women and children are home. So let's just say 10,000 people. 5 loaves and 2 little fish. But wait, there's more. So after he does that, you can imagine these disciples going like, wait a minute. Is this a magic trick? Is this Houdini? But Jesus says, let's take these guys on an adventure that they'll never forget. Immediately, Jesus made the disciples get into the boat and go ahead of him to the other side while he dispersed the crowds. So he's like, get in the boat and get out of here. And he's not saying, go on to the next town along the shore of the lake. He's saying, I want you to cross the lake. And after he sent the crowds away, he went up the mountain by himself to pray. And that's interesting. He's communicating with God the Father. The reason that this is in here is so that you're supposed to be like Jesus. You should be communicating with God the Father. And it doesn't matter. You can pray to Jesus, pray to God the Father. You always want to pray in the Holy Spirit. When evening came, he was there alone. Meanwhile, the boat, already far from land, was taking a beating from the waves because the wind was against it. As the night was ending, so just about this time of day, you can't see it, but the sun is starting to come up. Jesus came to them walking on the sea. So they spent the whole night out there. And they're trying to get to the other side. And they're going like, oh boy, we're going to do what Jesus told us to do. Because it's like, he fed those people. This is crazy. We need to do what this dude told us. And so they keep going and going and going and going and going. But they don't make it to the other side. They're out there the whole night. And Jesus has time to go up on a hill or a mountain, wherever it was, and pray, and then the sun is going to start coming up. So this is several hours later. As the night was ending, Jesus came to them walking on the sea. When his disciples saw him walking on the water, they were terrified and said, it's a ghost, and cried out with fear. But immediately Jesus spoke to them. Have courage. It is I. Do not be afraid. Peter said to him, Lord, if it's you, order me to come to you on the water. So he's asking for a sign, and Jesus is going, yeah, I'll give you a sign, Peter. You walk on water. So he said, come. Peter got out of the boat and walked on water and came toward Jesus. But when he saw the strong wind, he became afraid and started to sink. He cried out, Lord, save me. The most important thing he ever cried out in his life. Immediately Jesus reached out his hand and caught him, saying to him, you of little faith, why did you doubt? It's very, very hard not to doubt. You know, we look at Peter and go, oh, I'd be much better than Peter, but you won't. As you keep going through life, you'll doubt. You'll doubt more than you have faith. It's just the way people are. But just hang in there and know when to cry out. Jesus saved me. When they went into the boat, the wind ceased. And the way that it's written, the wind ceased is it immediately ceased. Like they're in the middle of the storm. Dun, 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 dun. The waves are crashing on the boat and everything. Jesus is walking through the water. We think of Jesus walking on this, like glassy water kind of lake. No. he's walking on like rolling waves and the wind, white caps and all that kind of stuff. When they went up into the boat, the wind ceased. Then those who were in the boat worshipped him, saying, truly, you are the Son of God. And Jesus doesn't say, don't worship me. And you should only worship God. If you worship anything that's not God, that's blasphemy. So you'll hear a lot of people say, well, Jesus never said he was God. He did many times. I don't want to get into all the times, but this is one of them. He lets them worship him. After they had crossed over, they came to land at Gennesaret. And that's the name of the lake. So Gennesaret was a fertile plain south of Capernaum, and Capernaum was where he lived at this time. The Sea of Galilee was also sometimes known as the Sea of Gennesaret. And then now Jesus was standing by the lake of Gennesaret, and the crowd was pressing around him to hear the word of God. When the people there recognized him, they sent word into all the surrounding area, and they brought all their sick to him. They begged him if they could only touch the edge of his cloak, and all who touched it were healed. And we talked about this before, but the cloak is a prayer shawl, which you'll see Jewish people wear today. It has tassels on it. So they're just touching the tassels on his prayer shawl. Like there's a woman that we studied earlier who was bleeding for 12 years. And she had the faith that if she could just touch, she had asked God, like, heal me, and somehow knew that she could go up and touch this prayer shawl and be healed. And she did it. Now there's a whole bunch of people doing this. And who do you think is not going to like this? Well, down there in 15:1 it says, then the Pharisees and experts in the law. So let's talk about that next time. Peace out.